A strange, superpowered alien announces he'll wipe out Earth, and the only people with a shot at stopping him are the school's most hopeless class. Here's the story recap of the 2015 live-action Assassination classroom. It begins with panic at a military operation. A bizarre creature has been located, and soldiers move in to take it down. Step by step, the team closes the distance, until the target suddenly lashes out. Multiple tentacles burst into view, striking faster than anyone can react. Gunfire fills the air, but it's useless. The unit gets picked off in seconds, and the mission collapses into chaos. Cut forward a few weeks, and the same nightmare is now wearing a teacher's smile. Inside a Japanese high school, a bright yellow thing that looks like an octopus collided with a cartoon mascot calmly runs roll call like this is the most normal job in the world. The students, meanwhile, are doing the opposite of normal, firing special practice rounds at their own teacher, trying to assassinate him between lessons. So how did a bunch of teenagers end up tasked with saving the planet? The students belong to Class 3E, the lowest-ranked group at Kunijigakaka Junior High. While the top students enjoy the main campus and all the praise that comes with it, Class E is treated like a warning label. This is what happens when you fall behind. The principal claims it's for the good of the school, and orders them relocated to a worn-down building separated from everyone else, out of sight, out of mind, and unable to drag down the elites. But the real shock hits when they walk into their new classroom. Waiting for them is their new homeroom teacher, the very alien responsible for blasting a chunk off the moon, and the same being who has openly stated Earth is next. And the government isn't denying it. Instead, they've made a deal. A Defense Ministry operative, Tadayami Karasuma, arrives to lay out the rules. The class has until graduation to kill their teacher. If they fail, humanity is finished. The catch is almost cruel. This creature moves at unbelievable speed, so fast that even trained professionals can't land a clean hit. The alien, cheerful, polite, and terrifyingly confident, explains his side of the bargain. He's willing to be hunted, as long as he gets to teach Class 3E. Why? Nobody can fully prove his motives, but he swears he won't harm his students. To give the kids a fighting chance, Karasuma provides weapons engineered specifically for this target, special bullets and blades made from a material that won't injure humans, but does damage the alien's body. To prove it's real, the creature grabs a gun and fires into one of his own tentacles. The students freeze, until the wound rapidly regenerates, growing back as if nothing happened. The message is clear: yes, he can be hurt, but killing him won't be easy. Then comes the incentive: whoever delivers the final blow earns 10 billion yen. For a bunch of students who've been told their entire lives they're failures, that number lands like a thunderclap. From that day on, Karasuma stays on as an assistant instructor, training the class during breaks and after school. Their lessons become a mix of academics and survival tactics. And soon, another adult joins the strange faculty, Irina Jelavic, a glamorous English teacher who's secretly a highly capable assassin brought in to finish the job. She tries hard. Even with heavy firepower and professional technique, she can't get close to a true kill shot. The alien is always faster, always smiling, always one step ahead, as if he's letting the attempts happen for sport. Meanwhile, something unexpected starts to change. As the students train, they improve, not just at fighting, but at thinking. They begin studying patterns, exploiting tiny openings, and working together like a unit. And their teacher, known as Koro-sensei, becomes a puzzle they can't ignore. He isn't just a monster with a countdown timer, he's oddly invested in their growth. Even stranger, Koro-sensei's face shifts color depending on his emotions, like a living mood ring. The students quickly realize that every expression, every tone shift, every reaction might be a clue, and maybe even a weakness. And that's the core of the story. A class that's been thrown away by the system is suddenly given the most impossible mission imaginable: kill your teacher to save the world. And in the process, they might finally become the best version of themselves. That morning, 3 classmates kept cornering him with a can't-fail idea. He didn't think the timing was right and tried to back out, but the pressure kept building until he finally agreed to play his part. During class, Nagisa calmly told the teacher he'd completed his work and stood up to deliver it. His posture looked ordinary, but a blade was concealed in his hands. Step by step, he closed the distance, then lunged. The strike never landed. Before he could even register what happened, the teacher's movements erased the attack as if it were nothing. Nagisa forced himself forward anyway, wrapping his arms around the bright yellow octopus instructor. A heartbeat later, an explosion cracked through the room. For a moment, a few students cheered, certain they'd ended the nightmare. Then Kayano and others rushed to Nagisa, panicked, demanding to know what the 3 plotters had done. The trio admitted they'd rigged a homemade grenade packed with special rubber rounds. Their plan was simple: let the bullets do the killing, and have Nagisa walk away with only light injuries. But when everyone looked around for proof the teacher was finally down, they saw something strange, a thin membrane covering where his body should have been. Confused, the class searched for remains, until they noticed the giant yellow head perched above them, tucked near the ceiling, listening to every word. Unharmed. He explained, almost casually, that he sheds and replaces his outer layer about once a month. The discarded skin was ridiculously durable, strong enough to absorb the full blast. The body on the ground had been nothing more than a decoy. And now he was furious, not because they tried to assassinate him, that was the whole point of the deal, but because they'd gambled with a student's life to do it. His smile vanished. His face flushed a dangerous red. In what felt like a blink, he was gone, then back again. The class barely had time to breathe before he revealed what he'd done. He'd visited the homes of each of the 3 students and quietly removed their family nameplates. He reminded them that his agreement with the government prevented him from directly harming them. But if they ever endangered their classmates again, he warned, their families would pay the price. After letting that threat sink in, he snapped back into teacher mode, told everyone to sit, and resumed the lesson like nothing had happened. Later, Kayano tried a different question: did he even have a name? The alien answered that he didn't. So she offered one the class could use, something half-joking, half-affectionate: Korosensei. The nickname stuck instantly. The students liked it, and the teacher seemed far too pleased with himself. From that point on, Korosensei was official. That same day, Tadayami showed up to find the class clustered outside by the basketball hoop, because Korosensei was somehow tangled in a net trap hooked around it. Irina arrived seconds later, equally confused, and both demanded an explanation. The students proudly admitted they'd set it up the night before and actually managed to snag him. Korosensei rocked side to side, trying to slip free. The net suddenly loosened and flung him downward, and the class didn't waste the opening. They opened fire with anti-teacher rounds. Still, it barely mattered. In the blink of an eye, the octopus vanished from the court and reappeared on the school roof, waving like he'd just finished a magic trick. Right then, a new student entered the picture, Akabane Karma. Recently suspended from Class A for his aggressive behavior, he arrived with that dangerous mix of charm and trouble. The next day, Karma came prepared. He'd even patched anti-teacher material onto his right hand, eager to test it during the first greeting with his new homeroom teacher. But when Korosensei showed up, he froze, because an actual octopus had been left on the desk, stabbed like a message. Karma quickly apologized, claiming he'd killed it by mistake, thinking it was Korosensei. Korosensei drifted closer, smiling again, calm, cheerful, and somehow more unsettling. He promised Karma a hands-on demonstration of what those tentacles could really do, and, with absurd confidence, he turned the unfortunate octopus into an ingredient, whipping up takoyaki as if this were the most normal lesson in the world. The day takes an odd turn when a dumpling ends up stuffed in the boy's mouth, an embarrassing gag that turns even worse when someone uses the moment to stick fake nails onto him just for laughs. Still annoyed, Nagisa heads home and runs into a new classmate along the way. The encounter puts him in a thoughtful mood, and it sparks a memory from when he was still part of Class A. Back then, after a scuffle with students from another school, the principal confronted Karma. Instead of scolding him outright, the principal made a point of saying something unexpected. Karma might be quick to throw hands, but the school would stand behind him. Spotting Nagisa nearby, Karma added that although their teacher, Kora-sensei, was definitely unusual, he was also undeniably effective. The problem was, orders were orders, they were still expected to take him out. Right on cue, Kora-sensei pops in and tells them not to get comfortable. If they want to succeed, they need to sharpen their fighting ability constantly. Karma, never one to let things slide, challenges him. Would Kora-sensei truly put his own life on the line to protect a student? Kora-sensei answers without hesitation, yes. That single word pushes Karma into a bold, reckless test. He pulls out a gun and throws himself off the cliff, gambling on one idea: if Kora-sensei dives to rescue him, Karma will fire at the exact moment the teacher gets close enough. As Karma plummets, he flashes back to the day he snapped on 3 upper-class bullies who were humiliating a well-behaved student. When the principal heard what happened, he didn't care about the reason. Karma had assaulted elite students. The punishment was severe, exile to Class E. But the plan in the present doesn't unfold the way Karma expects. Instead of rushing in like a sitting target, Kora-sensei flicks into action at impossible speed. Using his tentacles, he spins a web-like barrier midair and stops Karma's fall without ever placing himself in the perfect position for a clean shot. Karma is safely brought back up, but the result only leaves him irritated. His trap didn't work. Frustrated, he storms off. Elsewhere, inside the Ministry of Defense, national leaders debate the growing crisis. The president explains that since the creature arrived 2 months ago, Japan has become a target. Multiple countries have launched missiles toward them. Yet every time, the same alien octopus they're trying to eliminate has intercepted the attacks, effectively saving the nation. The president admits he originally planned to leave Tadami in charge of handling the situation, but with progress stalling, he authorizes a new approach: send in a new student designed specifically to finish the job. The next day, the class learns the truth. The transfer student isn't human at all, it's a robot powered by advanced AI. Its mission is simple: destroy Kora-sensei. The only hard limit in its programming is that it must never injure a student. It wastes no time. For its opening assault, the machine deploys built-in firearms and unloads on Kora-sensei. Predictably, the shots do nothing. But the robot has one terrifying advantage: it learns. Every failed attempt becomes data. Every exchange upgrades its tactics. As days pass, the robot keeps attacking during lessons, disrupting everything. The other students can barely focus, and after each outburst they're stuck cleaning up the chaos it causes. Still, the machine's calculations show progress. Its chance of successfully knocking Kora-sensei out climbs to 0.001 on the next strike. If it continues evolving through graduation, the probability could soar as high as 90%. To the class, that statistic doesn't sound impressive, it sounds annoying. Their main issue isn't the robot's long-term potential, it's that their school day has turned into non-stop gunfire and debris. So they take action. They restrain it with chains, limiting its movement and preventing it from using its weapons mid-class. Afterward, Kora-sensei approaches the newest student in a surprisingly calm way. He presents a thick pile of documents, profiles and notes on every class member. If the robot is going to stay, it needs to understand the people around it, learn their habits, and figure out how to coexist instead of acting like a lone assassin. Then the next morning, everyone's phones buzz at the same time. A message appears from the AI itself. It has created an app version of its system so interacting with classmates will be easier. It also announces a major shift in approach. It won't attempt to eliminate Kora-sensei solo anymore. From now on, it intends to learn teamwork and operate alongside the class. Kayano throws out a nickname idea for the newcomer, and the class quickly votes to go with it, Ritsu. Almost immediately, the class robot announces that a transfer student has arrived and will be entering any moment. Not long after Koro-sensei strolls in, a pale, white-haired boy suddenly drops straight down from the ceiling and crashes into the room like he took the scenic route. Before anyone can fully react, a man dressed in beekeeper-style coveralls steps inside and calmly scolds the boy for not using the door. He introduces himself as Shiro, acting as the boy's guardian, and apologizes to the class for the disruption. Ritsu then identifies the intruder as Hiroto Itona, mentioning that he and Itona trained together at a special agent school. Itona wastes no time boasting that he's stronger than everyone present, and to prove it, he challenges Koro-sensei on the spot. Koro-sensei accepts without hesitation. Shiro sets the duel's only condition: the arena is the space bordered by the desks, and whoever gets forced outside that boundary loses. The moment the match starts, Itona shocks the class by tearing off one of Koro-sensei's tentacles in his opening exchange. The surprise escalates when Itona reveals tentacles of his own, sprouting from his head. Koro-sensei studies him and realizes those tentacles aren't fully matured yet, but something about them triggers a bitter memory that visibly irritates the teacher. Koro-sensei avoids a barrage of strikes with precise dodges, then sheds his outer layer to shake off incoming attacks, another use of a hidden defensive technique he's already relied on earlier in the month. Clinging to the ceiling, he regenerates what he lost, but the recovery drains him fast. With his energy dipping, he can't evade everything anymore and takes several heavy hits from Itona. After weathering the assault, Koro-sensei admits something surprising: Itona is the first opponent in a long time who feels close to his level. Still, Koro-sensei doesn't fold. He switches tactics and brings out a rubber knife developed by the Ministry of Defense, effective because Itona's tentacles share the same kind of material traits as Koro-sensei's body. As Itona's tentacles are pressured and controlled, his speed drops, opening a window. Koro-sensei capitalizes, launching Itona clean out of the classroom. The boy isn't seriously hurt, Koro-sensei's shed skin cushions him, but the rule is the rule: he's outside the boundary, so he loses. Shiro collects his student, warns they'll be back, and exits. Once class ends, Nagisa and Kayano approach Koro-sensei with a question that's been bothering them: why would he choose to teach Class East in the first place? Koro-sensei answers that he's honoring a promise he made to someone important, but he refuses to say who, or what the promise was. Nagisa then asks what they can do right now if they truly want a chance to defeat him someday. Koro-sensei proposes an intense plan: spend the entire weekend at school studying, he'll stay too, turning it into an opportunity for both academics and assassination practice. The class agrees, and Koro-sensei officially names the event the Assassination Training Camp. Using his incredible speed, he tutors each student one-on-one, tailoring lessons to the subjects they struggle with most. Later that night, Tadami gets a call from his superior with new information: a fresh coach has arrived. The following morning, not long after Koro-sensei pops into Tadami's room and gets teased with questions about his romantic life, his mood suddenly shifts. He grows quiet, drifting into a memory of the day he lost the person he loved most. Right on schedule, Takaoka Akira arrives at the school and boldly declares he's taking over as Class E's new training coach. Before he even starts, he wins points by showing up with breakfast for everyone. The students are instantly charmed, thinking they've finally gotten a strict but caring sensei who actually looks out for them. Not everyone is convinced, though. Later, Irina pulls Tadami aside and brings up her past connection to Takaoka, an old military acquaintance. She warns Tadami that Takaoka's strategy is always the same: act warm, earn trust fast, and make students feel like they're family. The issue is what comes next. Once he has their loyalty, the mask slips, his control turns extreme, and he doesn't hesitate to use fear and physical force to keep people in line. Training continues into the second day, and Takaoka immediately raises the intensity, ordering the class to run 20 laps. Partway through, Kanzaki starts looking worse and worse until she finally collapses. When Takaoka asks if she's okay, she shakily admits she can't keep going and says she'd rather train under Tadami instead. That answer flips a switch in him. Takaoka steps forward and strikes her without hesitation. The class surges in, demanding he stop and let her go, but he refuses, insisting she needs to learn. He lifts his hand again, ready to hit her a second time, but before he can, Tadami appears and catches his fist in mid-swing. Tadami's voice is cold and firm as he warns Takaoka to back off and leave the students alone. Takaoka scoffs, accusing Tadami of being too soft, claiming that's why Class E is weak in the first place. Then he proposes a challenge: Tadami can pick his best student to fight him. If that student can place a knife against Takaoka even once, he'll admit defeat and leave the school. Tadami chooses Nagisa, while making it clear Nagisa doesn't have to accept if he doesn't want to. What the class doesn't fully realize is that Nagisa's calm personality hides something dangerous. He's not just talented, he's instinctively built for assassination. He keeps it buried behind a gentle demeanor, but when a real target stands in front of him, that hidden edge comes alive. As Nagisa steps forward, he's almost excited, like he's been waiting for a moment like this. Takaoka, confident and smug, doesn't take him seriously at first, until he looks into Nagisa's expression and freezes. In the blink of an eye, Nagisa closes the distance, places the blade at Takaoka's neck, and drops him to the floor like it's effortless. Furious and humiliated, Takaoka demands a redo. He can't handle losing to a kid. But Nagisa calmly reminds him of the deal. With polite words that feel sharper than the knife, he thanks Takaoka for the lesson, then tells him to accept his loss and leave. With no way to save face, Takaoka storms off, and the class collectively exhales. The students rush to Nagisa in relief, grateful he ended the nightmare before it could get worse. Not long after, a rainy day rolls in and class continues like normal, until Korosensei shows up late. The second he enters, everyone notices something is off. His head is swollen and puffed up, like he's soaked up water from the humidity and rain. As science class begins, Okuda nervously asks Korosensei to test a poison she created with all her effort and knowledge. Some students laugh at her, assuming it's harmless and pointless. But Korosensei, curious as always, drinks it without hesitation. For a moment, it actually looks like it worked. His face drains of color, strange horn-like shapes sprout from his head, and his body turns an eerie pale white, almost like he's been flash-frozen. The class panics, until Korosensei casually snaps back to normal and compliments her. He explains that her mixture is genuinely strong, built around sodium hydroxide, something highly dangerous to humans but not a threat to him. Impressed, he offers to teach her how to refine it into an even more potent formula. Then, as he shows off the effect, his body compresses into a razor-thin, blade-like shape, sleek and sharp, and he zooms off, leaving everyone stunned at how easily he can turn danger into a lesson. A short while later, the strange transformation fades, and Koro-sensei is back to his usual cheerful self. Calmly, like nothing happened, he tells the class to contact Professor Tadami and Professor Irina, then instructs everyone to assemble out in the schoolyard. Once they're gathered, he delivers a lesson that sounds less like teaching and more like spy training. A competent agent never relies on a single approach. If Plan A collapses, you pivot instantly to Plan B. To prove his point, he launches off like a rocket. Seconds later, he returns in a blur, so fast it feels like the air itself rips apart. The shockwave tears through nearby structures, leaving chaos in his wake. Then he casually reveals what just happened. He intercepted an explosive in midair before it could detonate, stopping disaster at the last possible moment. With that dramatic demonstration complete, he leads them back to class and shifts the focus to the upcoming exams. He tells them that the next test isn't just about grades, it's part of their mission. If they truly want a shot at taking him down, they'll need to sharpen their knowledge and build flawless strategies. To motivate them, he offers a very specific reward: the top scorer in each subject will earn the right to remove one of his tentacles. Every tentacle lost reduces his speed, meaning every academic victory nudges them closer to the day they might actually succeed. It's the perfect incentive: study harder, get stronger, and make the impossible a little more possible. After school, while everyone heads home, Koro-sensei decides that real learning should mean real experience. He gives Nakamura, the strongest English student, an immersive crash course by whisking her off to an English-speaking environment overseas so she can hear and use the language naturally. Next, he drags Karma, his math ace, into a bizarre field assignment involving measurements and calculations at a famous landmark. Keano gets her own study trip too, traveling abroad to examine a world-famous tilted tower and estimate its angle firsthand. By the time he's done, the class has basically turned into an international academic tour group, part study program, part training montage, with Koro-sensei happily documenting everything like it's a graduation photo project. When the exams finish, 3 students stand out: Nakamura takes the top spot in English, Okuda leads in science, and Karma dominates math. True to his promise, each earns the right to eliminate one of Koro-sensei's tentacles, small victories, but meaningful progress. Then comes the real turning point. With the final exam looming the very next day, the class shifts from studying to staging. They spend their time constructing the tools and setup needed for a full-scale elimination attempt, assembling every piece like a carefully rehearsed operation. That night, fireworks light up the sky, and the celebration feels bittersweet. The students can't ignore how much they've grown under Koro-sensei's guidance. They've come to respect him, some even genuinely care about him. But the reality remains: if they don't stop him, the world may pay the price. As if he can sense their conflicted hearts, Koro-sensei appears out of nowhere and cheerfully says he's excited to see what they've prepared for tomorrow, like a coach eager for a championship game. Morning arrives, and the operation begins. The students collect their weapons and head to the execution site. When they arrive, Koro-sensei is already restrained, and the rest of the trap unfolds in layers. The class has planned obsessively: no loose ends, no wasted steps. Everyone is tense, focused, and determined. Nagisa explains the key sequence: once they've removed more tentacles, Koro-sensei will be dropped into a bathtub filled with water during the rainy conditions they've anticipated. He's discovered that water is one of Koro-sensei's major weaknesses, and the plan is built around exploiting it. The students move in. Shots ring out as they try to tear away at his remaining tentacles. Then, in a coordinated strike, they drench him, gallons of water crashing down to slow him and weaken his defenses. Finally, 2 students rush forward and fire rubber rounds directly at his face, pushing the attack into its most dangerous phase yet. When it looked like Koro-sensei was finally about to take the hit, a sudden blast tore through the area, and the octopus-like teacher vanished in the chaos. Moments later, the class managed to locate him, but what they found was horrifyingly incomplete. His body was completely gone. All that remained was his head, sealed inside a dense, crystal-like pellicle that acted as a perfect shield. Nothing could pierce it. Not even the class's specialized anti-teacher bullets could leave a scratch. This was Koro-sensei's absolute defense, a barrier so tough it was said even a nuclear strike couldn't crack it. Still, the shield had a weakness: it wouldn't hold forever. The crystal casing could only maintain its form for about 24 hours. So the students quickly brainstormed a brutal solution: fill a swimming pool with anti-teacher ammunition and submerge him inside. The moment the pellicle finally failed, the teacher would be destroyed instantly on contact. Koro-sensei, however, wasn't convinced it would work. He argued that even if the shell broke, he could trigger another explosion to blast away the bullets before they harmed him. Then, out of nowhere, everything got worse. Several students began collapsing one after another. Keano checks them and realizes they're burning up, dangerously high fevers. Before anyone can even understand what's happening, Takaoka and his men arrive. Calmly, he admits he slipped a virus into certain students' drinks before leaving. According to him, once it spreads inside the body, the infected will die in 3 days, unless they receive an antidote. And of course, he's the only one who has it. Takaoka explains why he's doing this: he wants revenge. Because of Nagisa, he's been humiliated and turned into a joke within the Ministry of Defense. The shame has been eating him alive to the point he can barely sleep. Now he's here to settle the score. His demand is simple and cruel: hand over Koro-sensei, and he'll give them the antidote. Nagisa refuses. But the pressure keeps piling on, because just then, Itona shows up and launches an attack on Nagisa. Tadami jumps in to protect him and ends up getting hurt. Itona isn't here for the virus, he's here for a rematch with Koro-sensei. Realizing the situation is spiraling, Karma grabs Nagisa and drags him into motion. The two run, trying to stop their teacher from being taken away. Itona chases them, while Takaoka escapes with his crew, antidotes in hand, leaving the rest of the class scrambling to care for their feverish friends. Karma and Nagisa race up a tower, hoping to lose their pursuer. But Itona catches up fast, using his tentacles to smash the ladder behind them and cut off any retreat. Nagisa tosses a sphere, trusting Karma to handle it, but Karma is quickly cornered. He dodges frantic strikes, nearly slipping off the edge. Idona's tentacles catch him just in time, only for Itona to use the sphere against him, slamming Karma hard. Karma keeps fighting to stay moving, but eventually he's knocked down. Meanwhile, Nagisa manages to cling to the tower as parts of it crumble. With the situation collapsing along with the structure, Karma suddenly raises his hands and surrenders, saying he'll give up Koro-sensei. But it's a trick. Instead of handing the teacher over, Karma fires the sphere toward Nagisa, forcing Itona to react. Itona lashes out with his tentacles to stop them, and right then, the sky finally opens up. Rain pours down. And the instant Idona's body gets soaked, his abilities begin to fail. His power drops, his control slips, and the advantage disappears in seconds. That's when Koro-sensei reveals the truth: the class planned for this. They knew it would rain at that exact time, which is why they chose this day to move forward. The pool plan wasn't their only option, it was just Plan A. This was Plan B. Koro-sensei, impressed, praises their timing and teamwork. And before the moment ends, he even adds one more thing: if Itona still wants to be involved, the doors open. Just then, the boys get a ping from Ritsu, warning them that things at school have taken a serious turn. Not long after, Nagisa shows up in Takaoka's area carrying a bag. While they wait, Takaoka smugly reveals the operation is already in motion, and it's brutal. His idea is to get rid of their teacher in a way the creature can't counter. The plan? Seal the target inside a cement container packed with specialized anti-teacher rounds, and force Keano to be trapped with him. That way, if the teacher tries to blow himself up to clear the ammo, he'd also be taking a student with him, making the escape option basically impossible. Takaoka then demands Nagisa hand over the monster. Nagisa, desperate, pleads for one thing: let Class E finish this themselves. This is what they trained for. They want the final shot to be theirs. But Takaoka doesn't care. He waits until Nagisa dips his head, then cruelly takes advantage, slamming a boot down and grinding him into the ground like he's nothing. Nagisa endures it, humiliated and hurting, and then his phone buzzes again. Another message from Ritsu. And through the pain, Nagisa actually smiles. He calmly hands the bag over. Takaoka yanks it open, ready to claim victory, only to freeze. Because inside isn't their teacher at all. It's a soccer ball. In the next instant, the rest of Class E swarms in, and the tables flip hard. The thugs are cornered and locked down by a concrete trap the students prepared themselves, one more example of how this class has learned to think ahead, improvise, and strike as a unit. Their teacher appears, proud as ever. He praises Okuda for successfully producing an antidote that saved her classmates, and he compliments Nagisa for keeping his composure and executing the plan even while being publicly crushed. But the victory doesn't last long. Minutes later, military helicopters roar in and scoop up both students and staff, transporting them to a government facility. The authorities decide it's time to end this, and they have a new method: destroy Koro-sensei while he's confined inside the spherical barrier, while he can't move fast enough to dodge or run. The Ministry of Defense has already built a reinforced containment shelter designed to withstand an explosion, then plans to saturate the entire space with anti-teacher ammunition until there's no chance left. Before they proceed, they grant him one final moment, last words to his class. The students watch a screen in tense silence as their teacher delivers his final message. He tells them how far they've come. How proud he is of their progress. How, for him, there's no joy greater than watching them grow into stronger, smarter people. And he finishes by thanking them for letting him be their teacher at all. Then the operation begins. The sphere is blanketed with special rounds. A countdown starts. The facility braces. And when the moment hits, everything detonates. When the smoke clears, the shelter is still standing. The officials assume it worked. They declare the threat neutralized. But Class E doesn't celebrate. They break. The students collapse into tears, because no matter what the mission was supposed to be, they never wanted it to end like this. Nagisa can barely breathe through the sobbing. And that's when something strange happens. A familiar yellow tentacle slips into view behind him, holding out a tissue. Nagisa turns, wide-eyed, and there he is. Koro-sensei. Alive. Panic erupts among the soldiers, many of them bolting on instinct, as if the impossible returning is the scariest outcome of all. Meanwhile, Tadami can't hide his relief, happy, almost giddy, that his colleague somehow survived again. With the crisis temporarily easing, the class returns to their daily routine, back to school, back to training, back to the weird, normal, they've built around their bright yellow, superhuman teacher, including those morning practice shots aimed at that huge octopus-like head. Rewritten movie review script, original style, same theme. I went into this movie knowing absolutely nothing, and honestly, the title alone threw me off. If you say it out loud without context, it sounds like it could be a horror flick or a crime thriller. In a Western market, that's a pretty bold name for something that's essentially aimed at teens. But then again, younger audiences don't really care what the title sounds like. What matters is the fun, the chaos, and how wild the concept gets. And wild is exactly what this is, a live-action take on a long-running manga/anime series where a giant, yellow, tentacled alien with a permanent smile becomes a temporary teacher at a Japanese middle school. Not only that, he's already blown a huge chunk of the moon apart and promises to do the same to Earth if the students fail to kill him before graduation. So the entire year turns into the weirdest school subject imaginable, learning his weaknesses, creating strategies, and training to assassinate their own teacher. If you ever needed proof that Japanese pop culture has a special talent for taking something unbelievably specific and making it a full story, this is it. The setup is actually a strong recipe for fresh storytelling. You've got a group of students pushed into a discarded class, Class E, treated like they're the school's lost cause. And suddenly, they're given a mission bigger than anything in their lives: save the planet by becoming assassins. That idea alone creates a lot of potential for character growth, clever tactics, and dark comedy. But the movie doesn't always balance its own ingredients. At its best, it's playful action nonsense in a good way, creative, quirky, and surprisingly entertaining. The CGI is better than I expected too, especially considering how ridiculous the main character looks on paper. Koro-sensei is basically a living smiley face with shifting expressions like a set of emojis, and yet it mostly works. In motion, the character has personality, and the film manages to keep him visually interesting. The cast also brings a lot of energy. You can tell it's a strong lineup, and even when certain performances don't match the anime versions exactly, they still land. One noticeable difference is the main student character. He comes off more tough and traditionally masculine than the anime portrayal, but the actor still sells the role well enough that it doesn't break the movie. The pacing, for the most part, isn't a problem. The film stays busy and keeps throwing stuff at you: training, missions, school moments, and constant explanation of rules. If anything, the bigger issue is that there's so much exposition that it can become distracting. As someone who isn't a native speaker, I sometimes found myself glued to the subtitles, which made it harder to appreciate what was happening visually, especially during effects-heavy moments. Where the movie really stumbles is near the end. It starts off solid, world-building, introducing the rules, setting up the class dynamics, and establishing Korosensei as this strange mix of lovable teacher and world-ending threat. He's technically the villain, but he's weirdly easy to like because he's genuinely committed to teaching, and his dialogue gives him charm. The problem is the film later tries very hard to force emotional weight, and the emotional beats feel rushed, like the movie suddenly decided it needed a dramatic payoff even though it hadn't fully earned it. Instead of letting the teacher-student relationship develop naturally, the plot speeds up to reach the finish line. That rush hurts the most important part of the story, the dynamics inside Class E. Without enough time spent showing how these relationships grow, some major events later feel like they happen because the script needs them to, not because the story built toward them properly. And if you've followed the anime, you'll probably notice something else. The movie sticks close to the original for a while, but adjusts the ending in a way that feels more like, we need this to fit a film format, than, this is the best conclusion. It's not completely disastrous, but it's definitely one of those choices that makes you go, why change that part? This movie feels like it's ultimately about protecting the planet, and, in a funny way, protecting human pride too. That's the big gap between the mysterious teacher and the people around him, including Class E. What makes it stand out is that it tackles those stakes inside a comedy. Even when the plot gets heavy, it still keeps a playful, offbeat energy. A fair warning though, some jokes didn't fully land for me, mostly because they lean into a very Japanese sense of humor and timing. Still, I had a great time overall, even as an outsider. It's the kind of film that can be weird and charming at the same time, and that's part of the appeal. I also learned there's a follow-up by the same director called The Graduation. I've heard it didn't hit the same level of success as this one, but I'm not judging until I watch it myself. For now, if you haven't seen this first film, it's definitely worth trying. Just don't go in expecting slick, high-tech Western-style sci-fi spectacle. If you know Japanese storytelling, especially manga/anime adaptations, you'll recognize the tone and limits quickly. For context, I'd seen the anime before stumbling across this live-action version, and that made me both curious and slightly nervous. Anime to live-action can go either way, and this one absolutely embraces the "it might get crazy" part, because yes, it does. The opening stretch, roughly the first half hour, is easily the strongest hook. The pace is snappy, the humor works, and it's surprisingly engaging. After that, the film starts juggling too many characters and side threads at once. I found myself unsure who the central students were meant to be, and it got harder to connect emotionally with the class as a group. Oddly enough, the character I latched onto most was the teacher. Later on, the story finds its footing again. The scattered pieces start to line up, and it becomes more satisfying to watch. Some dialogue feels a bit unclear or overly lesson why, which might be a translation issue, or it might be intentional, since the story often tries to sneak messages about purpose, growth, and teamwork into the chaos. That said, the film sometimes struggles to decide what it wants to be. It's too ridiculous to play completely serious, but also too earnest to be pure comedy. It mixes a lot of genres at once: sci-fi, action, comedy, drama, even bits of horror and slice of life, and while that variety is entertaining, it doesn't always blend smoothly. Even with those issues, I'd still recommend it to people who enjoy anime, eccentric B-movie energy, or loud, stylized Japanese live-action filmmaking. It's important to watch it with the right mindset. This is adapted from an anime/manga world, so it's naturally exaggerated. And just like compressing a TV show into a 2-hour film, some character arcs and emotional beats will feel rushed. If you're new to the story, the setup is wonderfully wild. A strange superpowered creature has already destroyed a large portion of the moon and threatens to wipe out Earth within a year. Instead of acting like a typical villain, it strikes a deal with the Japanese government. He'll become a teacher for an isolated class of problem students at an elite school. The twist? The students are encouraged to assassinate him for a huge reward, and he actively trains them in tactics, planning, and discipline, while also pushing them to improve their lives. Trying to interfere. Meanwhile, the kids still have exams, personal drama, and everyday school struggles. Under all the madness, the real question becomes, why is this creature doing any of this at all? That mystery is what keeps the film moving. What impressed me most is how unpredictable the movie can be. It's quirky and constantly shifting, and it rarely takes the path you expect. The characters have distinct traits and interesting dynamics, and the special effects, while obviously stylized, are handled with more restraint than many live-action adaptations that go overboard. Western viewers might find the tone a bit hard to digest at first if they're not used to fast, experimental Japanese live-action. But once you accept the film's rhythm, it flies by. It has a frantic charm that's hard to replicate in another format, even if the manga and anime fans will always argue the originals are better. Just keep one last thing in mind, this isn't a complete story on its own. The sequel, Assassination Classroom, Graduation, covers the second and final part, so the ending here is more of a to be continued than a full wrap-up. I honestly don't even know how to put it into words, but if you're searching for something that mixes fun with real-life lessons, I'm telling you right now, give this anime, and the movie, a shot. You won't regret it. Quick spoilerish vibe check, I watched seasons 1 and 2 first, and that's exactly why the movie hits so hard for me. It feels so close to what I loved about the series, but also has its own energy. At times it gets a little strange, sure, but weird in that way where you're still smiling because it's just so entertaining. The live-action version surprised me a lot more than I expected. As the class adjusts, more chaos enters the picture: government handlers, outside assassins, including a seductive foreign teacher, new students with big personalities, and other forces, and yes, Koro-sensei is the heart of it all. He's hilarious, unforgettable, and honestly one of the best characters I've come across. The design, the tentacles, the expressions, everything about him is iconic. I watched the movie partly because it looked ridiculously cool, and it absolutely delivered. If you're asking me for a rating, I'd easily throw a 10 out of 10 at it for how much I enjoyed the ride. Now, after finishing both seasons, it's kind of wild how fast I went from just checking it out to, wow, I actually miss this. I'm usually that person who wants to get into anime but struggles. I tend to prefer darker stories, and I often avoid the overly cute stuff, which, let's be real, can be a big chunk of anime. So it's rare for something to grab me like this did. What's funny is, I watched the 2 live-action Assassination Classroom movies first, and I was genuinely impressed. I expected the anime to feel weaker after that, but honestly, I'm still undecided on which version I like more. Both have their strengths, and both hit emotionally. The story itself is way deeper than it looks from the outside. On paper, it sounds ridiculous: a smiley alien teacher, an end-of-the-year deadline, and a class assigned to assassinate him, but somehow it turns into something surprisingly meaningful. It's creative, well-structured, and has real emotional weight. That said, I'll be honest, Season 2 dips a bit in the middle. A chunk of it feels like filler, and it slows the pace. But when it locks back in near the end, it absolutely comes alive again, and the final stretch builds into an ending that hits like a truck. One thing that stands out, in both a good and slightly confusing way, is the tone. It can be silly and cute one minute, then flip into something heavy and serious with zero warning. Somehow it still works, but the mood shifts are definitely noticeable. And speaking of the ending, I was not ready. You'd never expect a goofy, grinning, Joker-faced creature to become such a powerful role model for Class 3E. He starts as this impossible target, but by the end he feels like the reason they all grew up. The craziest part is that the class begins wanting to save him instead of kill him, because he truly fights for them, like he genuinely wants his students to have futures they can be proud of. That final arc is heartbreaking. The roll call scene alone had me holding back tears, and when it reaches the moment you know is coming, it still hurts. It's one of those endings where you're sitting there like, I get why it happened, but I don't want it to. Even though it's fictional, the show makes you feel attached in a very real way, because Koro-sensei's humor, warmth, and dedication feel like something you wish you had growing up. Overall, it's 2 seasons of laughter, chaos, mystery, and heart. The jokes actually land, the lessons don't feel forced, and the characters stick with you. It's not just a comedy, it's also about growth, friendship, and what a great teacher can bring out in people. The twists keep you binging, and the emotional payoff is genuinely powerful. So yeah, watch it. It's weird, it's fun, it's surprisingly deep, and by the time it ends, you might miss it more than you expect. When I finished the last episode, I just sat there for a while, blinking at the screen like my brain needed a minute to catch up. My eyes were watery, actual tears, and that genuinely surprised me. Anime has hit me emotionally before, sure, but this one landed in a way I wasn't expecting. One big reason it works is how manageable the cast feels. At the start, Assassination feels like a game, plans, gadgets, attempts, reset. But the deeper the class gets, the more complicated it becomes. Not just because it's dangerous, but because they get emotionally invested. They don't just learn under this teacher, they change because of him. When you've grown because of someone, the idea of ending them stops being a cool objective and starts becoming something you carry. That's why the story hits so hard. If the show followed some random professional assassins, it might have been thrilling, but it wouldn't have been powerful. The emotional weight comes from the contradiction: this monster is also the best teacher they've ever had. Even the title can be misleading. It makes the series sound like it's going to be a dark, edgy thriller. But in reality, it's an oddly wholesome and deeply human story that starts light and comedic, then gradually blossoms into something genuinely moving across its 2 seasons. Another thing I loved is how the show handles its ensemble. A class of around 30 students should be impossible to explore properly, right? Most anime would pick 3 favorites and let everyone else fade into wallpaper. Not here. By the end, you don't just remember names, you remember personalities, strengths, weaknesses, friendships, rivalries, and little moments that make you feel like you know them. The relationships feel earned. Add the show's supernatural framework on top of that, and it creates this unique mix of absurd and sincere that just works. I honestly struggle to point to anything I truly disliked. And the ending? Yeah. It wrecked me. I'm not usually the type to cry easily, but this one got through. Even now, thinking back on random episodes gives me this warm, bittersweet feeling, like I went on the ride with them. It was witty, it was chaotic, it was deeper than it had any right to be, and it left a mark. Coming from a background where education can feel like non-stop pressure, tests, effort, sacrifices, you start asking yourself whether it's all worth it. This show quietly shifts that perspective. It suggests that the real value isn't only the knowledge you memorize, but what you become in the process, the discipline, the resilience, the way you learn to measure yourself fairly while still growing. One quote that sums that up beautifully is Koro-sensei's idea that tests matter less for what you retain and more for what they train you to do: compete, improve, sharpen your mind, and understand yourself under the same rules as everyone else. That process, more than any grade, becomes the treasure. And that's the genius of the series. The assassination theme is basically a metaphor. The methods, the strategies, the teamwork, the failures, the frustration, it all mirrors the way people fight through life. Society's current can shove you around. Things won't go the way you planned. And instead of wasting energy blaming everything outside yourself, sometimes the only way forward is to accept reality, keep moving, and figure out how to swim better inside the chaos. Rewritten review, original phrasing, same theme. There's a quote that basically sums up what this story teaches better than any life advice post ever could. In Class 3E, you learn that you don't always have to face things like a heroic statue. Sometimes you're allowed to retreat, disappear, circle around, and try again. If the rules don't forbid it, you can be clever. You can be unconventional. What matters is staying persistent, without turning impatient or losing heart, because after enough mistakes and retries, you eventually reach something that feels earned. And that's exactly why this series hurts the way it does. It carries the same kind of emotional sting you get from tragedies you can sense coming, like that moment with Shirley in Code Geass, or the kind of cruel inevitability that follows characters in Fate/Zero. You can feel the countdown ticking. You know what kind of ending you're walking toward. And still, when it arrives, it hits like you didn't brace at all. Another idea the story keeps returning to is how killing isn't always literal. It can be the smaller deaths we accept daily, trimming parts of ourselves just to fit in, silencing the honest version of who we are so people will approve. The more desperately you chase acceptance, the easier it becomes to bury your real self. Even the openings reflect that slow burn design. At first they can feel simple, almost too cheerful or plain, but as the story evolves, those same songs start to feel loaded. Suddenly you notice the lyrics, the visuals, the tone. They become emotional foreshadowing, and the meaning grows heavier the closer the class gets to the finish line. The moment that really amplifies it is when the students sing together, because it stops feeling like an anime opening and starts sounding like a shared memory being formed in real time. And eventually, the story lands on the simplest truth: good times don't last forever. But the most important lesson Koro-sensei leaves behind isn't just about endings, it's about perspective. Nothing is truly wasted if you learn from it. Even mistakes, even pain, even detours, if you look at them differently and extract the lesson, they become part of your growth rather than just a scar. There's also a sharp point about competition. It's dangerous to let people grow up without ever experiencing real challenge. Without it, they complain without effort, and they don't take life seriously until it forces them to. For talented people especially, meeting defeat early can be the best thing that happens to them, because frustration becomes fuel, and growth starts there. By the time it's over, I can honestly call it a masterpiece, right up there with series like Fate/Zero, Code Geass, Fullmetal Alchemist, Vandred, and other top-tier anime that stick with you long after the credits. What's wild is how it looks at first, a weird, funny setup that seems like it'll stay a quirky comedy. Season 1 mostly feels like that, smart, entertaining, and creative. But Season 2 pushes everything further, the character bonds get deeper, the stakes become real, and suddenly you realize you're watching something far more meaningful than you expected. Koro-sensei himself is a huge reason it works. He's hilarious, weirdly wholesome, and far more layered than his design suggests. Seriously, don't judge him by the face. The best part is that you keep questioning the premise: everyone's trying to kill him, but the more you learn, the more you wonder whether he even deserves that fate. The show constantly messes with your certainty, and the twists land hard because the emotional logic behind them feels honest. I also love that the series doesn't just teach lessons in a preachy way. The students grow, but so does the viewer, because the lessons are about failure, pressure, self-worth, and finding strength in your own methods. It can genuinely inspire someone who's struggling, because the show keeps insisting that being left behind doesn't mean being worthless. And then there's the finale. The last stretch is some of the most heart-wrenching anime I've ever watched. The final episode is brutal in the best way, especially when the class has to push through that final moment together. It's the kind of scene where your chest tightens and you realize you've gotten attached without noticing. It's not just sad, it's beautiful, and it somehow mixes grief and warmth in the same breath. When I finished, I wasn't just impressed, I was grateful. Hours later, I was still thinking about it. Is it flawless? Not entirely. It has a huge cast, and some characters stay pretty simple, defined by a single trait or role, while a few stand out with more depth. Keed is a good example of someone who gets more layers. There are also occasional logic hiccups that can pull you out for a moment. But even with that, the overall experience is so strong that it doesn't matter much. It's funny, it's touching, it's surprisingly profound, and it earns its emotional peak. For me, it's a genuine gem, easily among my all-time favorites. Even 10 out of 10 feels like it undersells how rare it is to start something expecting light comedy and end up with tears in both sadness and joy. Rewritten review script, copyright safer version. Going into Assassination classroom, I honestly didn't know what to expect. The first time I hit play, my brain was basically screaming, "What is happening right now?" A bright yellow, tentacled creature destroys the moon, announces Earth is next, and instead of being hunted down like a typical villain, he becomes a teacher. Not just any teacher either, he shows up as the homeroom instructor for the problem class, and then casually encourages those very students to train as assassins, to kill him. If that sounds ridiculous, it is. But weirdly, it works. What makes Season 1 such an easy binge is how it juggles chaos with heart. It's funny in a way that sneaks up on you. One minute you're laughing at the absurd classroom tactics, and the next you're realizing the story is quietly building something deeper. The mix of comedy, mystery, action, and school drama keeps pulling you forward. I finished Season 1, around 5th to 7th July 2025, faster than I expected because every episode adds another little hook. And the biggest hook is Koro-sensei himself. He's the kind of character who carries the entire show, charming, unpredictable, ridiculously overpowered, and somehow still emotionally warm. Even when he's being a total menace in the "try to murder your teacher" setup, he's also the most supportive presence in the room. The relationship between him and Class 3E isn't really about killing him in the traditional sense, it's about improving themselves, gaining confidence, and learning how to survive when the world has already labeled them as failures. That said, Season 1 doesn't give you all the answers, and that's both a strength and a frustration. It keeps raising questions like, who is Koro-sensei really? Why did the moon have to be destroyed? Why pick these students? Where did his powers come from? Season 1 mostly refuses to fully explain those things, which definitely builds curiosity. It feels like the story is saving the truth for later, and it's clearly designed to push you into Season 2. Now for the flaws, because they're definitely there. Sometimes the story leans hard on plot convenience, moments that feel like the writers needed a quick escape hatch. There are a few deus ex machina choices where something extremely convenient shows up at exactly the right moment, and while it may fit the themes, it doesn't always fit the logic. Some sequences feel like they're trying to force drama or tension that the plot didn't properly earn. There are also some straight-up, wait, really, moments. Like certain fights being won through tactics that feel a little too silly to believe, or characters getting off way too easily after doing things that should have had real consequences. Occasionally the show asks you to accept insane decisions because that's just how Assassination works here, which can be funny, but also kind of lazy. Character writing can be uneven too. At points, the dialogue feels awkward or unnatural, like a character suddenly becomes edgy just to create a cool moment. Some antagonists come off generic, and the development of certain students can feel rushed, like the show hits the beats it wants without smoothly building toward them. And yet, even with all that, I still had a great time. Because when this series hits, it hits. The comedy lands, the class dynamics are entertaining, and Koro-sensei is genuinely memorable. The show has this rare ability to be goofy and wholesome at the same time, and it's easy to see why people get emotionally attached. I do think some viewers call it God tier, mostly because Koro-sensei is so lovable, and the emotional payoff later makes people rate the whole experience higher. But being lovable doesn't automatically mean perfect writing, just like an annoying character doesn't automatically mean bad writing. The show is flawed, but it's also special. There's also a little bit of mild fan service here and there, but it's not overwhelming or distracting. So where do I land overall? It's a really entertaining watch with a lot of laughs, a surprisingly warm core, and a premise that somehow turns nonsense into something meaningful. It has stretches that feel average and a handful of messy writing choices, but it's still the kind of series that makes you want to keep going. Personally, I'd recommend it without hesitation. Final score, 10 out of 10, yes, even with the flaws, because it's just that fun for me. Rewritten review script, original theme, new wording, Assassination Classroom is one of those shows that looks goofy at first glance, but the moment you give it a real chance, it hooks you fast. The premise sounds totally wild. A class of students is assigned one mission: take out their teacher before he wipes out the planet. And the funniest part? Their teacher, Koro-sensei, is somehow the most lovable person in the whole story. What makes this anime stand out is how it balances so many different tones without falling apart. One minute it's straight up hilarious, the next it's surprisingly emotional, and then suddenly you're watching a genuinely intense action moment with great choreography. It's not just a comedy or just a school story, it's a mashup of genres that somehow works extremely well. Under all the jokes and strange situations, the show carries a lot of meaning. It highlights compassion, the importance of effort, and what can happen when someone finally believes in you. The teacher-student connection is the heart of the series, and it's done in a way that feels sincere rather than cheesy. Even characters who seem minor at first don't stay in the background forever. Nearly everyone gets a chance to grow and prove they matter, and you can clearly see how Koro-sensei changes their lives. The production quality also deserves real credit. The animation supports both the comedy and the serious moments, and the soundtrack is a perfect match for the show's mood shifts. The opening and ending themes are memorable and fit the overall message of pushing forward, staying hopeful, and improving yourself. For me, the best part is how watchable it is. It doesn't waste time with filler, and it's the kind of series that can match your mood, whether you want laughs, motivation, or something heavier. Season 1 feels brighter and more playful, with lots of fun class moments. Season 2 turns up the pressure, adds more intensity, and delivers stronger conflict and higher stakes. And yes, this show is genuinely funny. The first time I started it, I remember thinking, what is even happening? But a few minutes later, I was locked in and couldn't stop watching. The cast is weird in the best way, the vibe is unique, and the story keeps surprising you. Nagisa and Karma are easily two of the most entertaining characters to follow, but the rest of the class is also easy to love. By the end, you really feel connected to them, which makes the payoff hit even harder. If you want an anime that can make you laugh a lot while still delivering real emotion and strong character development, Assassination Classroom is a must-watch. It's wild, heartwarming, and memorable, and honestly, it's one of the best anime experiences out there. Whether you're new to anime or you've watched a ton, this is one class worth showing up for. Rewritten movie/anime review, copyright safe rephrase. The story begins with a task that sounds completely unreal. A group of students is ordered to eliminate their own teacher. What makes it even more absurd is that this target isn't just dangerous, he's essentially untouchable, a being that no government or law enforcement agency has been able to stop. And yet, despite the constant assassination attempts, this strange instructor pushes his class to work harder, improve their grades, and grow as individuals, all while reminding them not to give up on the mission. That's what makes Koro-sensei such a standout antagonist. His behavior is bizarre in the best way, he's playful, unpredictable, and oddly affectionate. Even his design feels intentionally loud, his bright appearance and goofy humor make him a flamboyant presence you can't ignore. He's nothing like the usual, stern mentor you'd expect in similar stories, but he still ends up being just as wise, and, surprisingly, easy to care about. The students around him are just as interesting because they aren't the typical, chosen ones. They're the lowest-ranked kids in a prestigious school, the ones dismissed as hopeless, lazy, or simply not smart enough. The series succeeds not only in giving them growth arcs, but also in portraying teenagers in a way that feels believable. Instead of one-note personalities with a single gimmick, even the background students come across as real people with insecurities, anger, ambition, and contradictions. One of the most rewarding aspects is how the story gradually makes you familiar with the entire class. By the end, it feels like their journey is the real heart of the show. Because you understand where everyone is coming from, it becomes genuinely hard to hate any of them, even when they make bad choices. Visually, the art style leans toward an idealized, almost child-friendly look, and the bright palette reinforces that. The world is full of color and energy, which is an ironic contrast considering the central theme is murder. Still, it works. The cheerful visuals match Koro-sensei's joking personality and support the show's life lessons in disguise vibe, where each episode quietly teaches something about discipline, friendship, failure, or self-worth. The soundtrack also plays a big role in shaping the mood. The opening may trick you into thinking this will stay light and silly, but when the drama hits, the music rises to meet it. The more emotional scenes are supported by tracks that effectively bring out the characters' internal struggles, giving weight to moments that could have otherwise felt rushed or overly simple. In Japanese, the voice acting is especially important. Koro-sensei's performance stands out because of the shifting tones. One moment he's comic relief, then suddenly he's intimidating, gentle, proud, or furious. The voices also help define personalities like Nagisa's softer, androgynous presence and Karma's threatening confidence, making them feel sharper and more distinct. Overall, I'd recommend this to teenagers, young adults, and honestly teachers too, because the series is built around education in a way that's both entertaining and unexpectedly heartfelt. It's easy to see why many people consider it one of the best animated series out there. No matter your age, it's worth experiencing. That said, I also understand why some viewers don't connect with the hype. The concept is undeniably fun, students training to kill their teacher is a wild hook, but the execution can feel like it doesn't push the darkness far enough. At times, it treats a deadly premise with the casual tone of a school club activity, almost like killing practice is no more serious than dance class. For some, the emotional peak only really lands during the graduation arc, while the rest can feel repetitive or built around familiar clichés. Another common criticism is that the most important backstory, especially what truly defines Koro-sensei, arrives too late, and even then doesn't fully answer certain big questions. Some solutions also feel overly convenient, and the world's rules raise, "Why didn't they try this?" thoughts that the story doesn't always address. Still, even with these issues, the show stands out as something different from typical shonen pacing. It's less about non-stop power-ups and more about following middle school kids carrying an impossible responsibility while learning what kind of people they want to become. In the end, whether it's brilliant or frustrating depends on what you expected going in, but it's definitely not a forgettable experience. Assassination Classroom Review, Rewritten Script. What really stands out about Assassination Classroom is how carefully it's put together. For a story with such a wild premise, it stays surprisingly consistent, there aren't many glaring plot gaps, and most events feel intentionally placed. The series does an excellent job exploring character histories and motivations, giving real weight to why Class 3E is the way it is. My main drawback is that a few students end up much more fleshed out than others, but honestly, with 28 students and only a handful of teachers, that's almost unavoidable. At its best, the anime blends sharp dark comedy, exciting action, and moments that hit harder emotionally than you'd expect. The setup is instantly memorable. After a strange tentacled being destroys part of the moon, he announces that Earth is next, unless he's killed within 1 year. The twist? He becomes the homeroom teacher of Kunijigakaka Junior High's problem class, and he doesn't just allow assassination attempts, he actively trains the students for them, while also teaching normal school subjects. That balance between absurdity and sincerity is the show's biggest strength. The humor comes from the students' ridiculous strategies and Koro-sensei's over-the-top reactions, but it never feels like jokes for the sake of jokes. Underneath the chaos is a story about growth, confidence, and students discovering strengths they didn't know they had. They start out labeled as failures, but little by little, you watch them build skill, pride, and direction. A couple of standout examples are Karma Akabane and Nagisa Shiota. Karma's story shifts from pure rebellious brilliance into something more purposeful, while Nagisa's quiet, observant nature turns into a real advantage as he develops sharper instincts and confidence. The animation and character designs help sell these changes too: expressive faces, energetic movement, and action scenes that feel fluid when the stakes ramp up. And then there's Koro-sensei, the heart of the series and also its strangest contradiction. He's a potential world-ending disaster, yet he might also be the most supportive and genuinely invested teacher those students could have ever ended up with. His weird quirks and dramatic reactions are hilarious, but what really sticks is how seriously he takes his students' futures. That mentor-student bond becomes the emotional engine of the entire show. Even with such a large cast, the evolving dynamic between Nagisa and Karma gives the story a strong center. Their personalities clash, their methods differ, and their respect for each other grows in a way that fits the anime's bigger message: people can change dramatically when someone finally believes in them, and pushes them the right way. Story-wise, it's also a series that knows how to juggle multiple threads. You get stories inside the story, different students' fears, goals, and past struggles, without the main plot getting completely lost. And emotionally, it's a roller coaster. You'll laugh a lot, you'll get tense during the more dangerous arcs, and yes, at some point, it's very likely the show will get tears out of you. That said, I'm not completely sold on everything. The concept hooked me instantly, and the early episodes are especially fun, but as the first season goes on, a few episodes slow down enough that it can be hard to stay fully engaged. I kept watching partly because people promised the payoff was worth it, but personally, I found the end of season 1 a bit odd and less intense than I expected. It didn't have the suspense I was hoping for, and the conclusion felt more anticlimactic than satisfying. Also, while the show does include life lessons and tries to aim for deeper meaning, some of those philosophical moments felt a little surface level to me. The character development is solid, but the overall writing, outside of the big emotional beats, sometimes lands as good rather than mind-blowing. I didn't really get that jaw-drop twist moment where everything suddenly recontextualizes itself. I first started the series after hearing Koro-sensei ranked highly in a Best Anime Mentor list, and I can absolutely see why. Whether you love or dislike certain pacing choices, he's still one of the most memorable teacher characters in anime. Final verdict: if you want an anime that mixes dark comedy with action, strong character arcs, and a surprisingly emotional core, Assassination Classroom is absolutely worth trying. Even with a few slow stretches, it delivers a unique experience that's funny, heartfelt, and genuinely different from most shonen-style stories. At first, I went in expecting a straight-up comedy, and it was hilarious. But the further I got, the more it revealed a surprisingly heartfelt core, a teacher quietly reshaping the lives of the students, and even the people around him. That hit me hard, especially because I'm a student who hopes to become a teacher one day. Somewhere along the way, what started as "this is fun" turned into "okay, I'm emotionally invested." As the story builds, the classroom bond doesn't just grow, it locks in. You watch these kids go from scattered, awkward, and doubtful to a real unit. And then the show starts playing with your expectations. You reach a point where you're honestly asking yourself whether they could actually go through with killing the person who's become their mentor. That tension is where the series really shines, because it isn't only about action or gags anymore, it's about loyalty, purpose, and what it means to be saved by someone. Then comes the big turning point, the teacher's past. The backstory lands like a punch, and the revelation that his fate is basically sealed anyway flips the whole mission on its head. Suddenly the class is split, not because they hate each other, but because they care in different ways. One side wants to protect him because he's changed their lives. The other side believes the assassination goal is the reason they became strong together in the first place. It's messy, emotional, and painfully believable. For a moment, hope creeps in. When the situation seems less catastrophic than everyone feared, you start thinking there might be a way out. And of course, the show doesn't let you stay comfortable for long. Another twist hits, the pressure spikes, and the students are forced back into an impossible choice, one that feels cruel precisely because of how close they've become. It all leads to a finale that's honestly one of the most gut-wrenching moments I've seen in anime, elevated by a soundtrack that feels like it was written specifically to break your heart at the exact right second. That's why, for many people, this series isn't just good, it's rewatch-worthy. It balances comedy with darkness in a way that's surprisingly hard to pull off, and it delivers real-life lessons without feeling preachy. That said, I've also seen the opposite reaction, and I get why it happens. Some viewers bounce off early because they don't connect with the cast right away. Others feel the tone can be a bit cheesy, or that the humor doesn't land. If you're someone who needs instantly gripping characters or constant unpredictability, parts of the show might feel a little too straightforward. And yeah, there are moments that can make you cringe if that style isn't your thing. But if you're open to a slow build, this story can sneak up on you. It's the kind of show that looks silly on the surface, then quietly turns into something that sticks with you. I've watched plenty of series, and very few have made me tear up. This one did it in just 2 seasons. Even if the first episode feels like it dumps a lot on you, it settles in quickly after that. Once it finds its rhythm, it becomes a surprisingly emotional journey with strong character growth and an ending that's hard to forget. Whether you end up loving it or not, it's one of those anime that people remember, and if it clicks for you, you'll probably want to experience it more than once. Raising hands if you're anything like me and you've been sitting on this one, unsure whether it's worth your time, this is your sign to try it. This is a simple, mostly positive, non-spoiler review, and while I wouldn't call it a flawless masterpiece, it's absolutely the kind of show that can sneak up on you and become a favorite. First off, it's not a perfect 10. There are a few story choices I wasn't totally sold on. But the thing is, the comedy, energy, and action are so strong that the weaker moments don't stick for long. The series just keeps pulling you forward with fun scenarios, clever pacing, and characters that grow on you way faster than you expect. Honestly, I can see why people put this in their top anime lists. It's got that rare mix of genuine character development, fun, in-between moments that don't feel like filler, emotional beats that land, and twists that keep the momentum going. By the time you're deep into it, you'll realize you've started caring about most of the cast. And then there's Koro-sensei, the heart of it all. He's the kind of teacher you wish existed in real life. He trains the students, challenges them, protects them when it counts, and somehow manages to be both ridiculous and inspiring at the same time. He isn't just a funny character. He's the reason the whole story works. The premise is wild in the best way. A class is told they have to take out their own teacher before the school year ends, because if they fail, the world is basically done for. Sounds simple on paper, except, this teacher is absurdly fast and nearly impossible to touch. We're talking Mach-speed reactions, dodging attacks mid-lecture like it's nothing. Even the serious forces in the world can't handle him, so the responsibility lands on a group of students who are already treated like the school's problem class. That setting creates a cool dynamic. The students are pushed aside, underestimated, and separated from everyone else, yet they're secretly dealing with the most important mission on the planet. And because nobody else can know the truth, it becomes this weird double life where they're both the bottom class and the only ones with a real chance to save the day. One of my favorite parts is how the show uses the assassination setup to highlight teaching. Koro-sensei turns basically anything, an attack, a trick, even a failed plan, into a lesson. The result is weirdly wholesome for a story with this kind of premise. It's like the show keeps reminding you that growth, teamwork, and confidence are part of the mission too. There are also some really fun recurring gags and visual comedy, especially from Koro-sensei himself. His expressions, mood shifts, and over-the-top reactions are a huge part of the humor. The animation style leans into that. Characters are simple and expressive, backgrounds are clean and stylized, and the whole look supports a lighter tone even when serious moments show up. On the technical side, the English dub is genuinely solid, and Koro-sensei's voice performance is a big reason the comedy hits as well as it does. If you're a dub watcher, you'll probably have a great time with it. A quick info note for anyone curious: the series started in 2013 and sits around the low 8 range on MAL at the time of writing. It runs for 2 seasons, about 49 episodes, around 23 minutes each. There's also a small related offshoot/special. Now, the emotional side. I tried to keep my guard up. I really did. But by the end, it got me. The kind of ending where you tell yourself, I'm fine, and then realize you are absolutely not fine. It's one of those stories that earns its emotion because you've spent real time with these characters. I even recommended it to friends who don't really watch anime, just hoping they'd give it a chance, because it has that universal hook: funny, heartfelt, exciting, and surprisingly meaningful. So yeah, not perfect, but extremely easy to love. For me, it climbed into my personal favorites list fast, right up there behind the classic shows I grew up with. If you've been on the fence, give it a shot. It might end up hitting you the way it hit me. One of the biggest strengths here is how much the cast evolves over time. The central viewpoint character is Shiota Nagisa, the soft-spoken, blue-haired student who reads people frighteningly well. He comes across as gentle, thoughtful, and empathetic, until the story reminds you he can flip into professionally dangerous in a heartbeat. That contrast becomes a core piece of what makes the series memorable. Irina Jelavic, the glamorous hired assassin and English teacher, on paper, starts out cold, calculating, and very much not the nurturing type. The students quickly clock her weak points and hit her where it hurts, mocking her persona with a nickname that really gets under her skin, Professor B, plus CH, which she pretends doesn't bother her, while clearly being bothered. Over time, being around the kids exposes her to something she never really had: a real childhood, real connection, and real belonging. She doesn't turn into a saint, but she does soften in a believable way. Then there's Karasuma Tadaemi, the stern government agent assigned to supervise the class. He's disciplined, serious, and terrifyingly competent, but even he ends up impacted by the weird emotional gravity of this class and their teacher. Akabane Karma is another standout: brilliant, rebellious, and already halfway down a path toward becoming a genuine menace. He's not just smart, he's strategically smart, socially sharp, too. But he's checked out of school in everything except attendance. Koro-sensei drags him back into real engagement, not through lectures, but through challenge and purpose. Keano Keed starts as the sweet, harmless presence, and later proves she's got layers. Terasaka Ryoma, with the two-tone brown and white hair, is earnest and straightforward to the point of being a human battering ram. Nakamura Ryo has the talent to stand out but learned to hate attention in middle school, so she shrinks herself down and ends up in Class 3E. Her time there slowly rewires that instinct, and she starts wanting to shine again. Even the outside additions, like the class's AI student, feel like they get refashioned by the environment. That's part of the point: the whole class begins to glow. And that's where the metaphor lands. Koro-sensei might have damaged the moon, but he functions more like a sun, pulling everyone into orbit, drawing out their strengths, and turning a group of discarded students into people who can reflect something bright. That's why the story brushes up against messianic energy without leaning too hard into it. Themes that carry through self-respect: you can't hit your goal if you don't believe you deserve to aim that high. Dignity: take pride in the work, even when it's difficult or messy. Teamwork: nobody clears impossible missions alone. Duty: sometimes the necessary thing isn't the comfortable thing. The necessary thing still needs doing. Memorable lines, paraphrased: that violent drive fills a gap inside me. Winning starts when you stop treating the whole thing like life or death. A master isn't more gifted, they've just failed more times than beginners even attempted. Nothing sharpens skill like controlled aggression. The scariest thing is realizing you're not scared at all. Growing up is learning who's worth copying, and who's worth tuning out. My ratings, same vibe, cleaned up, language, include censored insults like B, plus CH and B at $+ at RD violence and intensity. The premise is literally, students training to assassinate their teacher, but the emotional framing is oddly tender. Love and responsibility sit right next to the danger. Still not little kid material, sexual content, some teen boyish/leche humor shows up. Koro-sensei can be pervy in a goofy, mostly 2D crush/voyeur joke way. It's played for comedy and isn't aimed at students, but it's definitely there. Rating vibe, TV 14/parents strongly cautioned rewatch? Yes, already did, would again. If you need more good tween-friendly stuff, Troll Hunters, The Dragon Prince, The Last Airbender, Studio Ghibli Films, Shaun the Sheep, Classic Looney Tunes, One Piece, Polly, My Dog Skip. Current favorites, same list, lightly cleaned, Full Metal Alchemist, 10, Hunter x Hunter, 10, Jujutsu Kaisen, 9.5, The Last Airbender, 10, Vinland Saga, 10, Assassination Classroom, 9, Attack on Titan, 8.9, Parasite, 8.9, Tokyo Ghoul, 8.5, Troll Hunters, 9.5, Maid Sama, 10, Toradora, 8.5, Violet Evergarden, 9.5, Your Lie in April, 9, Made in Abyss, 9, Death Note, 8.8, Demon Slayer, 9.3, Slow start, but once it moves, it moves. You may also like, Akame ga Kill, Akiba Made War, Beyond the Boundary, Chika, Eminence in Shadow, Gate, Girls Und Panzer, Hackenden, Land of the Lustrous, Legend of Exorcism, Love Chunibyo, No Game No Life Zero, Princess Principal, Princess Resurrection, Reincarnated as a Sword. Alternate take, critical counter-review rewritten. I'm going to be honest, I jumped into this immediately after watching Attack on Titan for the first time, and that was probably the worst possible transition. Going from something I consider top-tier to this set my expectations in a way that wasn't fair, but even with that in mind, I couldn't stay invested. My biggest issue is the cast. Outside of Koro-sensei, who I can admit is at least entertaining, I struggled to connect with anyone. I made it around 20 episodes before tapping out. The character that lost me the hardest was Nagisa. I get what the show is trying to do, the quiet kid who's underestimated, the innocent-looking student with hidden lethality. But the way the story sells it felt forced to me. Scenes play out like people should logically react with caution, but instead the world bends so Nagisa can have his moment. It made the conflict feel staged rather than believable. There's also a tone issue. The series is labeled a comedy, but the humor barely landed for me. Most jokes didn't register as jokes at all. I only realized it was supposed to be comedic after seeing it described that way elsewhere. And the action. I wanted it to carry the experience, but it didn't. The fights often rely on shortcut visuals, afterimages, fades, quick cuts, stuff that feels like it's trying to imply movement rather than animate it. By the time I quit, I wasn't excited to see improvement, I was just ready for the story to wrap up. So yeah, I understand why some people love it, and Koro-sensei is a big reason it works for them. But for me, the characters, especially Nagisa, kept breaking immersion, and the series couldn't recover. I can tell this one hit a lot harder for other people than it did for me at first, so maybe it's simply not my perfect match. Still, I'm not writing it off. I've heard the second season is where everything clicks, so I'm planning to continue and see if it changes my mind. That said, I do think the first season would have benefited from being tighter, almost like a single 90 to 120-minute film version, because the momentum starts to fade way earlier than it should, and the middle stretch can feel a bit repetitive. Even with those issues, I don't want to pretend the show is careless or lazy, because it isn't. What stood out to me right away is how much respect the creators clearly have for the story they're telling. There's a sincerity in the way scenes are staged, the way lessons are delivered, and how the characters are allowed to breathe. It's not just, plot happens, it's, people change. One of the biggest strengths is how the show balances group progress with individual growth. The classroom feels like a living environment, not just a backdrop. Characters get their own moments to evolve, but it never feels like the story forgets the larger class dynamic. That teacher guiding students while students also shape each other vibe is genuinely one of the most charming parts. On a personal level, I connected to the class more than I expected. I'm autistic, and the usual, one-size-fits-all, style of learning has never worked well for me. In settings like that, I can fall behind even when I'm trying. So seeing students being supported in ways that actually fit them, while still being held to standards and encouraged to push forward, really landed for me. It reminded me what it feels like when peers don't just help you understand, but help you stay motivated and keep going. In that sense, I didn't just watch Class 3E, I kind of felt like I was sitting in it. And I also relate to the idea of wanting to become the kind of person who lifts others up, especially people who start life with extra obstacles. That, I want to help someone climb out of a hole I recognize, kind of motivation is powerful, and the show captures that spirit in a way that feels earnest instead of preachy. Honestly, if the series hadn't hit me in that specific emotional place, my rating would probably be noticeably lower. Because while the heart is strong, the writing isn't flawless. The premise is undeniably interesting, students learning assassination tactics against their own teacher. That's a wild concept, and it creates room for deep questions. Some eventually get addressed, but not always quickly, and a few still feel fuzzy even by the time big moments arrive. For example, if the teacher is